Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It seems to be a relatively small group, so I definitely encourage you to turn on your cameras and come prepared with questions. Just know that this session will be recorded, so please don't be sharing any personal identifiable information, including your PIDs, emails. But we definitely would love to interact with you guys throughout this workshop. So if you want, or if you want to stay anonymous, feel free to keep your camera off. For brief introductions, if you haven't met with me already, I'm Julia Ng. I am the BA-MI and BA-MPP Joint Degree Program advisor. I'm here with Emily Hines from Political Science, and then my supervisor, Dr. Nancy Gilson. She will be running the workshop today. But I'll go ahead and let Emily and Nancy introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily. I'm the new political science undergraduate advisor and here to help. So yeah, let me know if you need anything.
Emily, first, it's good to have you on board. We always like a good colleague and collaborator. It helps us. I'm Nancy Gilson. I'm the Director of Academic Degree Programs for the School of Global Policy and Strategy and for the International Studies program. I've been in my current position for 11 years. When I first came to GPS, it was with the intention of overseeing international studies, and the BA-MIA program was then new. We took 2 students a year. That's grown considerably, and as you all know, recently we have had several cohorts from the BA-MPP with the economics department and with the BA-MIA with political science. So we've grown from 2 students a year with 1 5-year program to about 30 students a year with 3 programs. And so this program, the 5-year program, is near and dear to my heart. I've been overseeing it for a very long time and worked on the curriculum of all 3. So I want to welcome you and tell you that I'm very excited about your interest in the program and helping you through the application process. We have a slide deck that we're going to work through that hopefully answers some of the more obvious questions. Julie is going to keep her hand on the chat, but you should also feel free, since it is a small group, to ask questions out loud, unmute yourself, ask questions if something isn't clear, but we'll have time at the end as well to take more questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by going through the application itself. There are a couple things about it that are not intuitive. It is, in general, I think, an easier application than the one that you use to apply to UCSD. Many fewer parts. But there are bits of it that are not obvious when you go through because you're actually applying to a graduate program, and so the application looks a little strange in some places. So we'll get started. You want to do the slides? This helps you find the application. You can also get it by going to the GPS website and then going to admissions and clicking through, and that will take you directly to the applications, or through graduate, the graduate application. I think the easiest way to do it is to actually go through GPS admissions, but by all means, copy and paste it as well. So when you apply for the program, you are going to be applying for each of you, the BA-MIA for International Affairs, the BA-MIA with International Studies, the BA-MIA with Political Science, and the BA-MPP with the Economics Department. And so what you see on the screen here are the programs for which you're going to be applying. So graduate programs, like your undergraduate major, have degree codes. And so when you apply for the program, the major code that's here in parentheses is the program for which you're going to be applying. So if you are in international studies, you're applying for IR 75. If you're in political science, it's PS 33. And if you're in economics, it's GP 76. And Julia, I'm not sure that's right. For political science, it should be a GP number. I think it's also IR 75.
I'll
For
double check.
political science, yeah, I think because that's the undergraduate major code. Once they change, once you're admitted to the program and change to the track that leads to the 5-year program, you actually get a change in major code, and I'm pretty sure that's the undergraduate one. But Julia will check and make sure that that gets corrected. The deadline for the application is April 10th. That's pretty much a hard deadline. Something comes up, your dog eats your computer, we get snow, something like that. We do consider taking things later, but in general, I like to make sure that people get their applications in on time. And the reason for that is that I like to have a short turnaround time on the applications so that you have an offer of admission before fall enrollment begins. So that you know exactly what you're going to be enrolling in, so that we have time to get your major degree, your undergraduate major code changed. And so we can also get you advised in terms of the courses that you need to enroll in. So getting your application in on time is really important for just not having spring quarter be harried and sort of, scrambling to get things done. Okay. You will matriculate to graduate standing in fall of 24. So again, when you apply to the program, when you're in the application, and we're going to show you what the application looks like in a minute, but when you begin the application, it's going to ask you the program for which you're applying, IR 75, GP 76. And the quarter for which you're applying. So even though you will start graduate work in fall of 23, if you apply in April of this year, you will actually start doing graduate coursework in fall of 23. Because this is a graduate program application, you're going to be applying for the first quarter in which you'll be an actual graduate student. So that's the second year of the program. And so that's fall of 24. And if you put the wrong quarter on there, I have to come back to you and say you have to resubmit your application. So just make sure that you have the correct pieces of information here. If you get past these two things, the program for which you're applying and the quarter for which you're applying, the rest of the application's a snap. Okay. Julia, next slide. So this is an overview. Again, I said this is a much less complex, or has many fewer parts to it than your undergraduate application. The application interface, when you go in, you have to do a statement of purpose. There are optional questions in there, and they really are optional, but sometimes there's information you want me to know about you. I think there's a diversity question there. There's a question about your other activities on campus. So it's an opportunity for you to kind of fill in what's between the lines on your resume, what may not be fully explained on your resume. Your statement of purpose for this is a sort of intellectual statement of purpose, like what you're interested in. So sometimes answering the optional questions about your background helps us understand more about you. That's not going to be in your statement of purpose. You have 2 recommendations. The letters of recommendation, a letter actually is optional, but you do have to have 2 recommenders to do an electronic referee recommendation, right? But you only have to have 2. You have to have, for your application, you can use a unofficial transcript. So we're fine actually with your academic history as you get it on Triton Link. When you matriculate to graduate standing, you'll have to have an official transcript that shows that you were awarded your bachelor's degree, but for the purposes of the application itself, just your academic history from your student history. And that has your, if you came in as a transfer student, or you transferred classes in because you spent a quarter someplace or a semester someplace, if those courses show on your academic history, as they do for almost all people, I don't need to have those transcripts. As long as everything that you're using to apply to your bachelor's degree is on your academic history, then that's sufficient. And so you can just upload a PDF of that. Next. Okay. Your resume. So you should have a resume with your application. It's required. I'm not a fan of like fancy resumes with lots of graphics and different colors, and I like straightforward resumes that tell us the sort of standard things of a resume. They're great models of it online if you want to look, if you don't have one. Some of you probably do. So as an undergraduate, I do understand that most of you don't have a lot of work experience. If you came in as a freshman to UCSD, transfer students sometimes do. But we're still interested in employment that you've had and internships that you've done. So even if you've spent summers being a lifeguard or waiting tables or doing retail work, I'd like to see those on your resume. And one of the things about that is that having a work history tells me, like, it's a signaling device about your ability to get up every day and go to a job and be there on time, and that you know what it means to sort of be a professional. This is a professional program. And so while you may think about those as jobs that you had to do, or your parents made you do, or just sort of, things that you wanted to do, for me, they're actually a very interesting component of your background. Internships that you've done on campus, jobs that you've had on campus, all of that should be on your resume. You should also include, as it says here, leadership positions that you've had on and off campus. For example, if you've been in a sport, if you played a sport, were you a captain? Were you a coach? Did you lead the choir in your church? Do you do, member of the Rotary? I mean, those kinds of things, part-time employment, volunteer positions. At Thanksgiving every year, you deliver meals to people who are shut in. Internships that you've done, even academic internships. Student organization on and off campus, extracurriculars that you've been involved in. Research projects that you've worked on, whether these are research projects with like in somebody's lab, or with an instructor, or things that you've done on your own. It tells us that you've done research and that you know what research is. That's a little bit different from the 5-paragraph essay that you all had to write in high school. Doing your own research is a sort of different beast. And then skills you have, languages, coding languages, computer skills, any kind of computer application. Again, this is the program at GPS is one that's going to get you by your second quarter. You're going to be taking a coding class in the second quarter of the core. And so knowing that you have those in your background, you don't have to have them. Not having them doesn't mean you're not going to be admitted. But it lets me think about how much tutoring has to be offered to you once you get here. Whether, having some advanced sort of coursework in it, summer prep, for example. So those things are all helpful. And I saw the question in the chat, what about before you came to college? Absolutely. Things that you did in high school count. Model UN, you were a coach of a high school basketball team. You had an internship when you were in high school. You guys are not that far out of high school, most of you, for those things to be irrelevant, okay? So they do tell us about who you are. Next slide, Julia. So your recommendations, you need two. These people will, so you will submit their name and email address into the application, and the system itself will then send them an email asking them to log on and do an electronic application, electronic recommendation. This is a scale that asks questions about your curiosity, your independence, your work ethic, whether you are creative, how well you communicate, those kinds of things, kind of, as you might imagine, sort of standard metrics that, you know, sort of ask your preparedness to go into a program like this. If someone wants to submit a letter, they may. I'm always happy to have those. We know we don't require them for this application, because we know for undergraduates, if you've been at a place like UCSD, getting a letter from an instructor from a class where there were 200 people can be difficult. You may not know people well unless you had small seminars. And so this allows you to get someone maybe who is a TA for a class, or someone in a smaller class, and they don't have to write you a letter that has to have a lot more detail, but can just talk about your work in the class, right? The letters should be from people that you should remember to ask people who can write you, who really can speak to your strengths. So Julie, is the next slide on letters as well? Yeah, so who's a good reference? Yeah, go ahead to the next one. Right. You don't have to have academic letters. So if you have a supervisor, an internship supervisor, a coach, so you really do want to ask someone who can say more than, my class is really hard and this person got an A in it, and so they'll be good in graduate school. I can look at your transcript and know what your grades are. And so I'm much more interested in having someone who says, this person came to class every day and they asked really good questions. This person came to class every day and worked really hard and tackled hard material. Or someone who was an internship supervisor who says, this person came in knowing zero about the work of this office and worked really hard to get up to speed and was always willing to take on something new. Or even a coach who says, showed up every day at practice, you know, managed to get to practice every day on time, even though they were a full-time student. They were always a full participant. They came in ready to do work, right? Again, a lot of it is about your work ethic and your commitment to something that you've taken on. So it doesn't have to be a UCSD instructor. It just has to be someone who can talk about you in, you know, terms that show me that they really do know you, right? Make sure that you reach out to people early and let them know what you're asking them. In other words, that they don't have to write a letter if they don't want to. But you want to give them plenty of time to complete the recommendation, that it's going to be turned in on time, and you want to make sure that that they've got time to kind of think about what they want to say about you. So yes, you can turn in more than two. You don't need more than two. Three isn't necessarily better. Two good ones is you know, really is quite good enough. But if you have three that you want to ask, you can. Right? So you really do want someone who's going to write a recommendation. There is a box in which they can say, you know, I think it asks something like, is there anything else you'd like us to know about this person? So you want them to be able to say something that makes it very clear that they know you and that they have something to say about you. Next slide. So transcripts, again, as I said a minute ago, you can submit a copy of your current academic history. Everything will be on there. Your AP scores are on there. Any transfer work you've done that has work that you did abroad, if you did any EAP. So that's really sufficient for us. If there's transfer work that you did not include in your application when you applied to UCSD, we'd like to see that. Sometimes if people do, like, you took a calculus class when you were in high school and you didn't want to submit it because you knew you were going to have to do the calculus sequence here, go ahead and submit it. If you took language classes, people who do language certificate classes, those kinds of things are very interesting for us to see. But as long as all of the coursework that you're going to use towards your bachelor's degree is on your academic history, that's sufficient. And then, as I said, to just, remind yourself that when you finish your bachelor's degree, which would be June of 24, at that point, we'll have to have an official transcript. And like everybody else, whether they're, that's applying to go to Georgetown, where you have to submit a request for a transcript from the registrar at UCSD and have it delivered to graduate division, you still have to do that, even though they're only a floor apart over in the student services building. You still have to request a formal transcript. So this gives you some idea of the application. This is just a little graphic that sort of points out some of the questions that you're going to be asked. Right. So let me point out one thing here. It says, have you previously registered as a graduate student at UCSD? The answer to that's going to be no, but you still, but then the next one says, if yes, please enter your PID. Please put in your PID. So even though the answer to the question above is no, you still need to put in your PID. And the reason for that is that that lets us know that lets us and the system know that you already have a PID. So if the university does a silly thing and creates a second PID for you, everything gets screwed up, because now you become two people in the data system, not one, and then we have to go through and kind of clean all of that up. So even though the answer to the question, have you previously registered as a graduate student at UCSD, is no, please put in where it says, if yes, please enter your PID. Please put your PID in there. Okay. And then, yes, at the bottom, you choose fall of 2024 as your entry term. Okay. So even though you're going to start the curriculum in fall of 23, you don't become again, this is a graduate. If you look at the top of the slide, it says Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs. So this is actually a graduate level application. We hold it in the system for a year until you finish the first year of the program, and then we send it to Graduate Division's admissions office. And so we need the correct term, quarter, if you will, of entry. So that's why you put in fall of 24. Right. If you're an international studies major, you're still doing this, you're still doing the degree code for international studies, even if you're political science. So there's 3 degree programs, right? So it's still IR 75. Is that right, Julia? Yes. If you're an international studies student, we'll go back to that slide so that we get that right for you. Okay. You want to hit start on this? Okay. You do not have to do any tests. There are no GREs. GPS doesn't take GREs anyway. But if you are, even if you're an international student, you don't have to do TOEFL because you're going to college in English. I don't need TOEFL scores. I don't need GREs. I don't need any of those kinds of test scores. Okay, that's one of the advantages of coming into the 5-year program rather than the 2-year program. So here's the recommendations. So you will, here's the form that you'll have to fill out. Okay. You want to make sure that you have, if this is a person who they were your professor, they were your internship supervisor, if they have a professional email address, we prefer to have that rather than their personal email address. It just keeps things sort of clear for us about the nature of your relationship with that person. If it's a coach for a team, they may not have, like if you do sports outside of the university, they may not have a team email address, then that's fine. But if they have a professional email address, we prefer that. Okay. And then on the Buckley waiver, so first of all, it says the date for submitting the recommendation is no later than April 1st. We'll take them later than that. In fact, we do, but we want your recommender to have a date prior to the need for you to push send on the application, so that they're being a little bit, they've been encouraged to get ahead of things for you. They can submit ahead of you. In other words, they can submit their recommendation. They will get that email. So you still have until the 10th to submit your application, right? For the Buckley waiver amendment, whether you waive your right to access, look, my advice to anyone who asks about this waiver is always to waive your right to access to the recommendation. And the reason for that is that we tend to get fuller letters when people have waived their rights. If you're asking for a recommendation from someone who you don't know if they're going to give you a good recommendation, and that's why you want to retain the right to have access, you should not ask that person for a letter, right? So anybody that you ask to write you a letter, you should trust completely to write you a strong application, a strong recommendation. And so waiving your right to access to it should not be an issue. A real professional is going to write a professional recommendation. You can ask them, please not talk about your background. If it's someone that you've known for a long time, you can give them, you can script them in any way you want to. We know that people do that. But we have a tendency to get stronger, less boilerplate recommendations when students waive their right to access. And so that's my advice to you, but you can do what you want. That's not required. Okay. Okay. So this is the BA MIA application. As it shows in the red box below, is there additional information you wish to add that is not addressed elsewhere in the application? If so, please include it here. You don't have to fill in this part. It is additional information. It's a duplicate of what appears later in the application, but we do sometimes get these where people fill them in both places. You can fill it in either place. So again, this is a good place to tell me something that you think you might want me to know. So for example, if you came in as a freshman, which means if you're applying now, if you came in as a freshman, you came in when COVID was still hot, and maybe you took some time off because you really needed to be at home with your family because it was a stressful time, you can tell me that, right? The reason there's a gap in my transcript isn't because I wasn't a serious student, but it was because my grandmother died. My parents were, having a hard time having me away from home, or, it's a good place to tell me anything that you think needs to be explained in your application or will strengthen your application. This is a place to put it in this question. Same one. This is for the student, those of you who are in the economics department. Same question appears on your on your application as well. Okay. Can we go back just a second, Julia? Go back one more. So one of the things that you'll see here on the application, and this is also true on the BA MPP, but it has slightly different language. Select the career track you intend to pursue at GPS. Select the area of specialization you intend at GPS, the language you want to specialize in. I am not going to hold you to this. So a lot of students think that if they tell me they're going to do international management or development and nonprofit management, that when they come to the school, we're going to absolutely hold them to that. My hope is that you tell me that you want to do international politics, and after you're halfway through the core, you have an identity crisis that leads you to realize that development is really your thing, and now you want to do the development track. I hope that happens to you. It's the best thing to have happen when you're in graduate school, is that you discover there are things to be interested in that you didn't know. And so this just gives us an idea about your interest. It doesn't affect whether we admit you, and it's not something we're going to hold you to. Okay, but it does help us kind of think about what you're interested in. Okay, next slide, Julia. And you'll see the BA MPP has it as well. Select the area of specialization you intend to pursue. Put environmental policy and decide later on that what you really want to do is program design and evaluation. I'm fine with that. Okay. Before we go on, are there questions about the application? Does anybody have a question you want to ask out loud? No? Okay. So let's talk about the personal statement. So the statement of purpose for a graduate application to a program like this is different from the one that you wrote when you were an undergraduate. It's about your intellectual interests and what you understand of your professional objectives at this point. So this is really for you to think about, like, what is intellectually, what's the thing that you're interested in? When did you first become interested in it? And, sort of how have you developed that interest? And look, for some of you, this may have happened when you were, before you came to college, like you had an internship with the Red Cross, or, you spent summers working in your grandmother's law firm and decided that you were really interested in, social policy, or you got an internship, you did Model United Nations and managed to spend a summer at the UN. It doesn't have to be this lofty thing. But how did that turn into something that you wanted to study and think about and kind of develop as a career interest? And what classes have you taken? Sort of how have you worked at developing that interest to a point that now you want to carry it with you into graduate school? So this is really a statement about your sort of your intellectual life, right? And sort of what do you think you want to do with it? Now, again, we're not going to hold you to what you think you want to do with it. Again, I hope you have an identity crisis what you get once you get into graduate school. But it tells me that you've thought about why you want to get a graduate degree. Why do you want a master's degree? Rather than to just not have to go out into the world and get a job yet. which I completely appreciate, by the way. But what's the thing that, really does make you want to stay in school and learn more? So, you can write about how some of the extracurriculars or co-curriculars that you've done have added to that intellectual interest. How your life experience has contributed to that. We get a lot of statements of purpose of kids, for example, who are first generation students who, had to help their grandparents through the social services system. And that really developed an interest for them in issues of inequality or social policy. And so you want to talk about that, that's fine, okay? So I want you to think about this intellectual interest in large terms and sort of the growth of it over your, over your time as an undergraduate. So this is here, and this is, admittedly sort of tongue in cheek, but it really is. I hope you take it seriously. I can't stand statements of purpose that begin with since the beginning of civilization, people have been worried about inequities in education. First of all, that's not true. But second of all, it doesn't tell me anything about you and where your interest in it comes. I'm happy to have you tell me that what you want to do is get out of GPS with a master's degree and run an NGO like Doctors Without Borders. I'm happy to have you tell me that. That's I understand that goal. The question is, how are you going to get there? So, are you going to save the world? Probably not. But do you have a desire to have a job where you do save real people on the ground in a place? That's great. Tell us that, right? It's not, your personal statement shouldn't be about something obvious. Again, that's sort of all people should learn to read because that's how they get social services or whatever. That's probably not even true. It's not about your family history. It's not about the story of your life. It's unless those things really do link directly to the development of an idea about what you want to study and what you want to do once you get out with your master's degree, right? I'm fine with having you tell me that you want to be the US ambassador to a major country. But what do you know about the Foreign Service? Or what do you know about how people actually get there rather than just as an aspirational goal? Okay, so this is a substantive statement about you as a person who has sort of intellectual aspirations. Right. So instead of doing a lot of stage setting, my preference is a personal statement that tells me in the first paragraph, what's the thing that you're interested in? Start out by telling me that thing, make a declarative statement. And the reason for this isn't just that I don't want to read a lot of stage setting. Sometimes I do, it depends on how long the essay is. But I'm interested in you. And strong declarative statements also tell me something about your state of mind. I'm interested in this thing. I know I'm interested in this thing. I can even put language to this thing that I'm interested in, right? It doesn't have to be lofty. It doesn't have to be as I said, very specific. At the age of 30, I want to be running Doctors Without Borders, or I want to be in the Foreign Service at the level of the China desk at State. But I do like to see, straight out of the box, what are you interested in and why is it interesting, right? When did you first recognize that thing as a thing that was worth being interested in? Was it your job? Was it an internship? Was it your working for your parents? Was it your parents' jobs? Was it something you did as an undergraduate, right? Why is it interesting? you're going to be studying it for 2 years. You have to have some idea about why it's interesting. I'd like to hear you at least think out loud about why it's interesting to you. Like, what's problematic about it? Why is it an interesting question to answer or problem to solve, right? And then what's your idea about what someone who's interested in that thing do? You might not end up doing that thing, but nonetheless to have an idea about where you want to go from where you are now, right? And then finally, how does having a master's degree in public policy or international affairs get you there, right? So this tells me that you thought about why here, as well as why you're interested in that thing that you're interested in, and where that interest came from, right? So that you're making the case that you've got this developed brain, this developed idea of yourself. And one of the things to remember about the BA MIA and the BA MPP program is that you're going to be coming into graduate coursework with people who are coming into the 2-year program who have been out of school for a while. Some of them have been in the military. Some of them have been working at the UN. Some of them have other graduate degrees. Some of them have been teaching English all around the world. And being able to talk about what you're interested in means that you meld into the first year cohort almost seamlessly, because you've got something that you're interested in, they've got something that they're interested in, and that way you're no different from them. And so it gives you a sense of confidence going into this group, which is otherwise older than you are and has a longer resume than you do. Okay. So look, you've all taken writing on campus, and you should know this. The essay comes from the first paragraph, so you really start out there again with a strong declarative statement, and from there you build it out. So getting the first paragraph right is really important. And there are all kinds of ways of making that statement. A class you took, a book you read, a job you had, a job your parents had, the circumstances of your growing up. You thought you wanted to be one thing, you thought you wanted to be a doctor, but then you said organic chemistry sucks, and so instead I'm going to do something else, but you're still really interested in medicine. I mean, there are all kinds of ways of setting up this essay, but it has to have an idea, and it has to be an idea about yourself and an idea that you can identify, okay? And usually, as this says, usually we study things that because they're complicated or they're a puzzle, because there's more than one way to do it. And the question is, what's the value added in studying this thing in detail? GPS is going to give you the opportunity to drill down into something, into a policy problem, into a set of tools, building a particular kind of tool chest. Why do you want to spend 2 years doing that, right? Do you have some idea about what it is that you hope to get out of GPS, right? That you're not going to get just by going out into the world with your bachelor's degree. And then, again, what are the jobs that you think someone is going to get here? If you tell me that what you really want to do is you want to be a financial analyst at Morgan Stanley, I'm probably going to tell you should get an MBA. But if you tell me that you want to study, regulatory policy on banks, or you want to you're interested in trade negotiations, right? Then we can talk about the kinds of jobs those things lead to. So what is it that you think you want to do? And this is going to become important because in between the first and second year, you have to have an internship. And so having an idea about what you're interested in is going to help you work with career services as a senior, finding a good internship for that summer in between your senior and graduate year. So thinking now about what you want to do is going to be important. Now, that internship may tell you, oh, I thought I wanted to run a nonprofit, but God, the work is hard and the pay is crappy. And that's a good thing to know. But thinking now about what you want to do helps you sort of develop that interest as you work with career services from the very first quarter that you're here, which is next fall. Okay. So this is it in a nutshell. Look, this is an arc, right? This is a statement that should have an arc. What are you interested in, and when did you first get interested in it? What have you done to develop that interest? How do you think GPS is going to develop that even further? What are you hoping to do with that degree, given that interest once you get out, right? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And how do you foresee yourself getting there with this program? Right. So it's a story arc. The gun goes off in the first paragraph. What's the thing you're interested in, right? It has to, then we got to know why, the gun is produced in the first paragraph. It's got to give us a reason by the final paragraph. What is it that you want to do? Right. That's check off, by the way. Go ahead. So this takes us to what happens once you apply. So you hit send. The application is due on the 10th. You will be notified about your admission status prior to fall enrollment. So you will get a notice from GPS admissions telling you to go back into the system, and then you will get an email from me that tells you that you've been admitted and that you need to meet with me or Julia to talk about what your fall classes should look like, and to kind of plan your senior year of classes to make sure that you do in fact graduate with your bachelor's degree. If you're a BA MIA, so either in international studies or in political science, we may require you to go to summer prep. The BA MPPs don't need to do this because you will have had microeconomics and you will have had econometrics. Just to give you some idea about summer prep, this is not punishment of the about 90% of the students who apply to the 2-year program are also required to do summer prep because they don't have upper division economics. They don't have an upper division stats course. They don't have a lot of math. So this is really a way to make sure that you are successful in the fall quarter and the start of the core programs. So we usually have a summer prep program that has 100 people in it. So it's hardly punishment. Most of your colleagues are going to do some prep, but if you've taken Econ 100A on campus, let's say you're a political science major and you took Econ 100A and you got at least a B in it, we probably won't require you to do summer prep in micro, but we might ask you to do it in quantitative methods. Okay, so you'll be notified of that at the time of admission. And then finally, on this, admission to the program is provisional upon your completing the GPS core in good standing. So matriculation into the graduate year requires that you pass the GPS core with B grades. So graduate good standing is higher than undergraduate good standing. To graduate with a master's degree, you have to have a 3.0. To graduate with a bachelor's degree, you have to have a 2.0. So your matriculation into the graduate year requires that you have good, solid grades in the GPS core in your first year. By the way, the 5-year students do that across the board. So this is not something that should make you nervous, because you guys know what it means to go to school on a quarter system. You know how to manage the sort of pace of work, which is the thing that hangs up a lot of students who come into the 2-year program that are used to semester systems. You've probably seen these before. These are ways to get, to sort of keep track of what's going on. Instagram is probably the best if you're interested in student activities at GPS and, getting, spending some time at lectures and workshops and things that go on at the school, which are open to you. If you have questions about your application, about your eligibility, you're struggling with your personal statement, by all means, reach out to me or Julia. I'd be happy to make individual appointments with any one of you, all of you. Most years I end up meeting with most people who apply to the program so that you turn in the best application that you possibly can. All right, you guys, thank you so much for your interest. And again, send me an email. Okay. Take care, everybody.